Yo, what's going on, everybody? We are 5 days away now from the LA Marathon. I'm well into the taper. The something is in the someplace, as they say. And today what I want to do is go over some race predictions based on several different race calculators that are out there. This is something that I did a couple years ago before the 2019 Chicago Marathon, and I think that basically the predictors were pretty spot on. It's hard for me to really tell though, because in 2019 I went out as fast as I thought I could go, but not as fast as I probably should have gone. And so I ended up with a big blow up at the 30K mark and did a lot of walking towards the end. So the finishing time ends up being much slower than the predicted time. But you know, that's kind of the risk in not getting your kind of race prediction or your pacing predictions correct. So today we'll look at 5 different ways of looking at your training and determining where you should line up, or where I should line up for the 2022 LA Marathon. So first, let's go over these from kind of the slowest to the fastest. The first one that I'll look at is 5:38. Now, 5:38 isn't necessarily like a running website or a training plan or a coaching plan or anything like that. It is a statistical model that people have looked at trying to figure out what are the most accurate ways of predicting how a person will do in any given race, but more specifically, how people will do in the marathon specifically. One of the inspirations for the creation of this 5:38 model was that different race predictors were very accurate up to the half marathon distance, but they would tend to overestimate, or I guess underestimate, depending on how you look at it. They would make you go out way too aggressive for the marathon times, which could really be a problem. See also my 2019 Chicago Marathon experience. And so what they did was they came up with a different statistical model, and the only data points that they need are how many miles per week are you training to your marathon, and you put in a recent race time. And when I put that in, I used 80 for mine because my last 4 weeks heading into the taper were 80-mile weeks. So I had a couple that were a little bit more than that, but I think 80 is a fair estimate. And the 4 weeks before that were in the high 70s. So I think overall, I feel like 80 is a pretty good place to put that estimate of my weekly mileage. And then I put in my most recent half marathon, which, you know, was a half marathon that I raced, but it was also during an 80-mile week, and the following week after the half marathon was also an 80-mile week. So some caveats there. But that time was 1:28:09 in Florida. And so when you put in 80 miles and 1:28:09, you don't put in your age or any of your workout paces or anything like that. The number that it gave me was 3:07:21. Now that's the slowest one, but very much off of my goal of breaking 3 hours. So now let's take a look at the next slowest prediction that I have, and that was Metathon. Now, Metathon is kind of like two things that are built on top of each other. It's based on the Tanda race predictor model, which is another one of those like statistical kind of like retroactive analysis models where they took a bunch of people, looked up what their race results were, and then went back and looked at what their training was. And really the only things that it cares about is how many miles per week are you running? What's the average pace for all those miles? It doesn't care if you're running your easy paces all too fast, or you're running a lot of really slow, easy miles, and then a small number of very intense faster miles. It just looks at whatever the overall average is for all your miles, and then it takes your age. And then it looks at that together with a recent race performance, and then it will give you a number. Now, the way that Metathon works is it takes that Tanda model and plugs it into your Strava, so you don't have to figure out like, well, how many miles did I run over the last 8 weeks, and what was my average pace for all of those miles put together. It combs through your Strava, so if you don't want an app that does that, don't use Metathon, but I've done it. It's kind of like a plugin, and it picks out the numbers from all of your data. And for me, that came out to a race result of 3:05:40 seconds. Again, well off my goal of a sub-3 marathon, but has a lot of solid science behind it, at least solid math behind it anyway. So let's move to the next one. This one's more in the middle of all the results that I found, and this is from Runner's World. Now, Runner's World also has a race calculator in it, and when you're looking at the Runner's World time predictor, what you do is you give it your goal race, and then you give it a recent race result as well, and then you correlate that also with your weekly mileage. I put in that 128.09 from the Clearwater Running Festival Half Marathon and 80 miles per week, and it gave me a result of 3:03.24, or basically 7-minute miles, which I feel like certainly very, very doable for me. 3:03. I think I can do better than that. I did better than that last December. Granted, that was on CIM, which is a net downhill course, although it is a little bit of a roller. So is that accurate? I don't know. I think that's a very safe prediction. All right, now let's get to some of the more interesting ones. The next one that we'll look at comes from Stryd, from my foot pod. Now, the foot pod I wear on every single one of my runs. I guess you could say that no device knows me better than the Stryd does. And then I think it's taking the most data. It knows all my interval work and my threshold work. I'm not sure how much of that gets incorporated into the race prediction, but it all gets incorporated into my critical power number. And that in turn is used to calculate what is the wattage that I should be running at to be able to complete the marathon distance, and it also knows what pace that correlates to. And I was even able to enter in the Los Angeles Marathon course, including its elevation profile, into its race predictor, and it gave me a time of 2:57.50. Now, keep in mind that this is the old LA Marathon course. I don't think they're updated with the new LA Marathon course yet. And that new LA Marathon course, instead of ending with a nice downhill, ends with an unfortunate uphill. So that's a little bit of a change. But it's having me right now run it at about 269 watts. It seems like a very doable number for me. It's a number that I've been able to hit pretty easily on long runs where I'm putting in extensive marathon pace work. So I feel really good about that. And that number still seems a bit aggressive for me. I'm not sure I'm quite in 257 shape, but I'm also not gonna put it out of the realm of possibility. Overall, it makes me feel good. Like, the thing that I feel takes in the most data is giving me numbers about where I think that I am, based on like the training runs that I put in and the marathon paces that I've been putting in and the threshold efforts that I've been doing as well. All right, let's do one more. This one is, I think, probably as much of an outlier as the 5:38 prediction was, although this one generally is a pretty well-respected kind of way of figuring out or estimating what a good race prediction or race pace would be. And that's the Jack Daniels VDOT tables. Based on a VDOT number, it correlates on a table to various different race times. And for me, my Garmin that I've been using for the last, I think about a month now, maybe a little bit more than that, has been telling me that my VDOT number is 56. It was 55 for a little while, then towards the end of the marathon training block, it got up to 56, and that number correlates to 2:56.01. Maybe I should be thinking bigger, but ultimately I just want to be able to break that 3-hour barrier, whether I break it by 1 second or 1 minute. I don't particularly care. So the goal for me is to run the race as conservatively as possible while still hitting my goal. We'll see in 5 days whether or not I can actually do that. Here is, I think, one part that is a very big potential wrinkle for me. So one of the things that I would love to be able to do for this race in LA is to be able to just stand right next to the 3-hour pacer and don't let that person out of my sight for the entire race. But I think because I'm running on an ASICS bib, ASICS provided me with the bib so that I could run this race. I signed up very, very late. I think I signed up after the corral seating deadline. And so I'm in the open corral, where I think that if you don't have a recent race time, I think you get placed in the open corral. So I think that I'm gonna have to do a little bit of fighting to get towards the front of that corral. I'm going to be doing a little bit of weaving in the early miles of that LA Marathon, which is going to be a little bit frustrating and a little bit scary, because it basically means that I'm not going to really have a pack to run with the entire time. So that concerns me a little bit. I know sometimes in races you're allowed to, or there's a way that you can request to be put in a different corral at the expo. I'm not sure if that's an option here. I'm, as usual, really bad about reading like all the things that the race directors send. So we'll kind of figure it out. At the end of the day, if I have to stay in the open corral, that's fine as well, because I'm going to be running off of power. And so there'll be times where I'll be running much faster than like even splits, and other times we'll be running much slower because the LA Marathon course, I think, is relatively hilly. So we'll see what happens, but I think that it doesn't really change. Looking at these numbers don't change very much for me. I feel like I have a pretty good sense of what marathon effort feels like, and I'm really leaning towards, on my watch, only having a couple of fields set up to look at during the race. I think I'll be looking at my power output, maybe like total time elapsed, so I can remember when I need to take gels. That maybe I'll look at heart rate at the same time. So not a lot of information that I'm gonna be going at. I'm gonna be trying to really go on of like what feels like something I can maintain for 3 hours, or hopefully a little bit less than 3 hours, regardless of whatever kind of like time that ultimately ends up being. Whatever feels like marathon pace is whatever pace I'll end up being. Hopefully when I'm done, the clock will be showing me a happy number and not something that's a little bit slower, but the goal is to run a really good race, well executed, and to my fitness. So we'll see about that. Once I get my bib and stuff, I'll post all that information in case you guys do want to track me. You guys certainly don't have to. I'll be posting a video the following day, so you'll be able to see all the footage of it as well, but I know a lot of you guys like to do that as well. Before I wrap up for today, I do want to remind you guys that there is going to be an LA Kofuzi Shakeout run, so let's meet up at Big Dean's Oceanfront Cafe in Santa Monica, 5 p.m. on Friday, March 18th. ASICS is going to be there. You could try on and test drive either the Nimbus 24 or the Nimbus Lite 3. I'll be wearing the Nimbus Lite 3 on that particular day. We're going to run down to Ventura Skate Park and back along the beach. All paces are welcome, and you can also adjust it depending on how much or how little or how quickly you or not quickly you want to run on that particular day, because it's just going to be an out and back. When we get back, there will be some chili dogs waiting for us, courtesy of ASICS, as well as some post-run beers. It should be a really, really fun time. I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of you guys in the sunny West Coast. The weather's getting nice here in Chicago, and I'm looking forward to having more of that in California in just a couple of days. So I can't wait to see you guys there. It's going to be fantastic. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?